Hmm. My computer is deciding to slow down this morning. Yeah. Is it recording? Yeah, it's recording. Okay. Good. Then on. Come on, you can do it. Got to send a lot of positive energy and happy thoughts out to the computer to encourage it. Come on. Yay. All right. So today we are talking about character concepts, which, kind of like thought, embraces quite a lot of different principles and different definitions and different terms. We'll start at the basics, and that means that we're starting with the definition of character, which should pop up in a moment. We can hope. Wow, it's pretty crazy. I'm only running one piece of software on this computer right now. All right, good. As I read, of course, I will note some of the important parts of this definition. A literary representation, that means in story form, of a person, composed of behavioral traits, psychological dimensions, and motivations. As with plot, this definition includes a number of important ideas. Notice that I've said that this is a representation of person. I used person instead of what other word that wouldn't have been quite appropriate? Lauren? No, that's correct. That wouldn't be appropriate either because I shouldn't define character by talking about character. But people in our world usually equal what? Boy, this is fun today. That word might appear in a moment, like magic. A literary representation of a person. We might be tempted to say human. And we're using the word person instead of using the word human because human is a biological term. It refers to a specific type of scientifically determined person refers to something else. Person refers to something that has these human character traits, behavior, psychology, motivation, emotion, these sorts of dimensions. So if you want to talk about the desk over here, you could say there are a lot of physical similarities between the desk and me. We're both made of matter, we're both solid. We could talk about chemical processes that are same for that desk as for me. The significant difference between that desk and me is my personal dimension, my ability to make decisions, my ability to think, my ability to behave, and that's what makes me a person. So we're talking about a person instead of just talking about a human being. Some of the important principles, like I just said, characters are not always human. Somebody want to give me examples of non-human characters in stories that possibly we have read or that you are familiar with from elsewhere? Colby.
Like trees that are human, like they say that they're alive and moving.
Can you give me an example of a tree that is alive and acting in a story? One of my favorite books from childhood figures a tree that is a character. Oh, yeah, does the Wizard of Oz have some? I'm not as familiar with the Wizard of Oz as most people are. Oh, yeah, that's right. The trees that throw apples. Excellent. So the trees are characters. Sammy. The Giving Tree, thank you very much. One of the best books ever written by human beings. Tree figures a tree that is a character. Other examples of non-human characters? Come on, movies, books. That's all you got. You folks should be brought up on Disney. Yeah.
Yeah, was it like in the movie, like the silverware and stuff's alive? I can't remember.
Beauty and the Beast? Yeah, you have a host of non-human characters in that, created by magic. Sammy? Pocahontas, excellent. What do we have in Pocahontas? I've never seen that one. Tree is a character in that one too? Landon?
Toy Story?
Toy Story, excellent. A bunch of non-human characters in Toy Story. Yeah.
Monsters Inc.
Monsters Inc., excellent.
The one with
The two little mice. Oh, Cinderella. Okay, excellent. So, yeah, Elia. I'm sorry?
Aladdin.
Sure. That rug and the flying rug. Let's look at the flying rug, because the flying rug obviously demonstrates some personal characteristics, and we can consider it a character. It has behavior, it has a seemingly an emotional dimension, and the ability to make decisions. Excuse me. Characters always demonstrate traits and motivations. And I want you to bold, highlight, or somehow note those terms. Traits and motivations. What's a character trait? I use that term, you hear it, you understand it on some level, but let me see if you can define it. Can somebody give me a definition of trait, or possibly an example of a trait that you have or somebody else has? No. Oh, good. So that would be a biological trait. But what I want to do is avoid the biological traits, because that leads us just to the human thing again. And let's look at non-biological traits. Got another. Funny. Somebody could be humorous and have an excellent sense of humor. Give me another trait. Yeah, B. Smart. By the way, in your notes, you probably should say, hey, examples of traits. Humorous, smart. Somebody give me something else. Athletic. Thank you, Matthew. One more. 4 for good measure. Harold, you look like you're about to say something. Oh, you know what? There's sort of a slang term that we use for this, Harold. Sometimes we call people tech savvy, and that means they know a lot about technology. Excellent. So all of these are character traits. Can somebody tell me what they all are grammatically? What part of speech are all of these words? Thank you very much. Adjectives. Athletic. Character traits are adjective words that describe characters. Remember that I'm talking in terms of language, because tomorrow you will be writing about character. And when you're writing about character, I want you to use adjectives to describe. Okay, that's what we mean by traits. What do we mean by motivations? Thank you, Matthew. Perfect. What is their goal? Matthew, do you remember when we were talking about goals or interests before? Connected to what? I'm sorry? That's right, we're talking about different types of conflict. So character and conflict are kind of related. Conflict is about goals or interests of characters coming into conflict. So you have a character, and that character has an interest or a goal, a motivation. They want something. And unfortunately, they can't get what they want because somebody else stands in the way. So the character dimension relates directly to plot. Talk about one, you can talk. Anybody stop me if I'm not good to move on? No, we're good? Okay, set up your notes. We have 4 different types of character. The characters are static, dynamic, round, and flat. So I'll give you a moment to set up your page with those. Notice the antonyms, the opposites. Static is the antonym of dynamic. Round is the antonym of flat. So when we talk about a static character, we can contrast it with a dynamic character. But what's not going to make sense to us very much is to contrast static with round. That's a discussion that's not going to make much sense. And trust me on the fact that it won't. We can get into later how you can work with those. But when you're working with static, you should think about it contrasted to dynamic. And when you're thinking about round, you should think of it contrasted to flat. You may want to take a shot on any one of those. We discussed them briefly in the pre-assessment, but you want to take a shot on a definition? Colby. Thank you very much. Nicely done. Let's take a look at and I'll give you the definition in a moment. Let's take a look at the word static, meaning staying still. Can you tell me what word that is similar to that also means staying still? No? Sorry, it's ready to my mind, but probably not ready to yours. I was thinking about words like stationary. If something is stationary or stationed somewhere, it sits somewhere. Static comes from the same root. And it means a character which never undergoes a significant character change. And this is sort of a map of how it works. At the beginning of the story, they demonstrate character trait A, whatever that is. And at the end of the story, they demonstrate character trait A. They never change. That doesn't mean they're a bad character, by the way. It just means that they don't change. And when I'm talking about them not changing, I mean their traits don't change, their motivations don't change. This is what does not change. Some students in the past have told me, well, that character dies. Isn't that a change? No. That's a biological change. We're not talking about biological. We're talking about character traits or motivations. Somebody want to give me an example of, from a story, from something maybe we've read or other stories you're familiar with, of a character that really seems the same at the end as the beginning? Character never really changes. Exits the story the same type of person they entered. Well, let's think back on what we've read. Let's think on, oh, what do we want to do? Let's think on the open window. Is Frampton Nuttall a different person at the end of the story than he was at the beginning of the story? Remember the open window?
Not really, because he's so scared.
Very good. Nervousness, anxiety is his defining character trait, his trait A, and he ends with that character trait as well. He's a static character. There's no change in Frampton Nuttall. He wants change. That's his motivation, but he doesn't get it. Anybody have another example? That's from our story, yeah.
In the Telltale Heart,
Yes.
the person who killed the man,
We would call him the narrator in the Telltale Heart. Pretty much, he starts insane, he ends insane, doesn't he? There's no sort of transformation or guilt over what he's done. He begins and ends the story in the same way. Both static characters. If static, then what will be the definition of dynamic? Matthew? That's correct. By the way, the word dynamic, you think, oh, dynamic means cool. No, dynamic means technically in motion. So if something is dynamic, that means it moves a lot. And that's why we talk about a character which undergoes a significant change in behavioral traits, psychology, or motivation. They are different people at the end of the story. Examples? Oh, the wife in the monkey's paw. So you think she's different at the end from how she was at the beginning? How would you describe her at the beginning then?
At the beginning, she was kind of like fun and normal, and then by the end, she from the doctor's side, she acted.
Oh, excellent. I could see that, and I could see you defending that, to say that she seems to be pretty stable at the beginning and she's totally unstable and unhinged at the end. Excellent. I could see that in writing. Any other examples? Once again, I know that, yeah, go ahead, Will.
The young man in the like foghorn.
Oh, good. So what's the transformation of the young man in the foghorn, our narrator?
Before he saw the monster, he was like working, and then after he saw the monster, he was like kind of freaked out and eventually.
So, Will, I think I like where you're going here. Let's say that he becomes wiser or more knowledgeable at the end. He understands the world is much greater than he thought it was. So before, he might have been naive. Here's a good word for you. You should write that word down. And yes, it actually takes the 2 dots, but I'm not quite sure how you would hotkey those 2 dots on your book. So you can just use an I. It looks like name. If it is it pulling up as misspelled? Okay, because sometimes it might auto-correct it to the 2 dots for you. Naive is a term that roughly synonymous with ignorant. And remember, it means stupid. It simply means that somebody is inexperienced and doesn't know much. So we could go from naive to the opposite of naive, which would be wise or knowledgeable. I like that, Will. Thank you. And of course, I know it seems like I harp on this all the time, and you might think that this becomes redundant, but I do think that some of your simple child stories demonstrate these concepts very clearly. Something like the Telltale Heart or the Monkey's Paw becomes more sophisticated, and that's where I want us to be, but we could start with children's stories to demonstrate the concepts. I think The Lion King provides one of the best examples of dynamic character change that you're probably familiar with. Simba going from irresponsible and young to mature and adult. And the character change is so incredibly obvious in that story, and the story's all about it. Round and flat. Somebody want to throw a definition of one of those out there? Remember from the pre-assessment? Yeah, Amir.
Black character, that's no part or little part in the story.
No, actually, it doesn't refer to how much of the story they control, because they might have a big part in the story. I'll tell you what, I think that, let me see about a character. I think that Mrs. Sappleton's niece has a big role in that story, but I think she's flat.
A flat character is one that has two character traits.
That's right. Flat character is a character which only displays a single defining character trait or a set of closely related traits. It is a superficial character the author does not develop with complexity. Harold. This is flat. Think flat as superficial, right? There's not depth. There's no depth going on. It's a big chunk of definition, so I'll pause a moment for you to take the notes. I'll pull out some words that I believe are important. Now, the word single and the word set might seem different, but this is why I wanted to draw the attention. Somebody want to give me an adjective describing Sappleton's niece in the open window? Give me an adjective describing her. I like that word. Did I spell that correctly? No, there's no I there. Yeah, anyway. What else? Give me other words that describe her. Mischievous. Nothing else? Thank you, B. What? Sneaky. I like that. I will say dishonest. I will also say manipulative. What can you tell me about all four of those words? Besides the fact that they're adjectives. By the way, in your notes, I would recommend that under the definitions, you might say, hey, examples, and then you could say, like, the open window. And for me, I would probably abbreviate titles. So if you're taking time to type the open window, you might just think about TOW, the open window. Telltale Heart would be TTH. That'll make your life a lot easier. So in the open window, Sappleton's niece is mischievous, manipulative, sneaky, and dishonest. All four of those words are basically referring to one character trait. They're not significantly different. And this is the trap that some students fall into. They say, well, those are four character traits, so they're a round character. No, no. That's a set of character traits that's basically all just one character trait. And it's good that you can use different adjectives to describe a character. That will avoid repetition in your writing, but realize that still makes her superficial. She's got one character trait. We know very little about her except that she derives enjoyment from manipulating other people. That's all we've got. So she is superficial. She is not complex. Good to move. Or what's the definition of round? Colby, go ahead.
There's multiple character traits.
That's right. Character which displays multiple different character traits, often exhibiting traits which conflict or contradict each other. Pulling out some important words. Character is basically realistic. Every single one of you, if you were a character, would be a round character because you are complex people. Everybody has complex character traits. Nobody is superficial. We might only know people in a superficial way, but everybody has complex character traits. A round character is one that's more realistic. A little bit of an advanced question. See if you can answer this. Which of the four conflicts must have a round character? Why, Will?
Because it's inside of you and it's like about that character and only about the character.
True, but what's inside? What's happening inside in an internal conflict?
Emotion.
You've got it. You've got the right answer. I'm just going to pull out the explanation a little bit. Can somebody bridge on what Will's talking about?
One of your traits might do something, but with the other trait might do something else.
So they, by definition, have conflicting character traits, right? Excellent. Every time you have an internal conflict, you have a round character because they're demonstrating different character traits, and those character traits are in conflict. Okay, so which story did some of you write about with internal conflict? And Colby, tell me about the conflict Melinda Alice. But hold on. People not liking her at school is saying something about them. Tell me character traits about her. Use adjective words to describe her.
She was untrustworthy.
Okay, untrustworthy, so she seemed to be kind of treacherous and mean. She has demonstration of bullying behavior at the beginning, right? Okay, so she's cruel, untrustworthy, and what else? What's in conflict with that? Well, she is selfish. Colby's doing a great job, but help him out. What else do we have? We have the bad side of Melinda Alice, right? And what else do we have?
The wait, like the story or like another thing?
No, her, Melinda Alice. We can move to somebody else in a moment. In those three wishes, if she has a bad side, her superficial, selfish, cruel side, what else does she have that's in conflict with that?
Her good side?
Demonstrated by what?
Not killing the snail.
Oh, true. She doesn't kill the snail. Good. Michael, what were you going to go for? Excellent. There is an interest in her to wish good for people. She's about to use her wishes to wish for people to be happy, wish for them all to be beautiful. I can't remember specifically what she's wishing for, but Michael, you're absolutely correct. So she's a round character, and she's involved in internal conflict because she has this sort of good side and bad side. And the good side is charitable, caring, concerned about other people. And the bad side is cruel and selfish. She's a round character. And an example of one. Every character in literature can be described using one of these four terms. And if you're describing somebody as flat, they by definition cannot be round. If you're describing them as dynamic, by definition, they cannot be static. So remember, those are opposites. Those are antonyms. tomorrow you will write. And in the prompts, by the way, the prompts in the assignment sheet right now are slightly broken. I made a couple mistakes. I'm going to fix those today. But tomorrow when you receive your prompts, the prompts will be something like, hey, in this story, this character, decide whether they're dynamic or static and defend your answer. And then you'll see an example on the assignment sheet. I've given you an example from, I can't remember which story. Talk about how you do that writing. Let's see where I am here. Okay. I'm going to give you sort of a little outline, and then just very briefly, for how you would do this in writing. If you decide you have a dynamic character, then you must provide evidence for the two contrasting traits. So Melinda Alice, we talked about, or no, actually, let's go back to what Drew said about the Mrs. White and the monkey's paw. So Drew needs to provide evidence about her being stable, probably that conversation at the beginning. I'm sorry, Micah. I don't know why I keep doing that. I apologize, Micah. We need evidence for the A trait, the beginning trait, and then Micah says she's unstable, so the B trait, of course, is her flipping out right in front of the door, wanting her zombie son to come back. If you want to write about this clearly, you also find the moment in the story which causes this change. You should be able to see it. So I sometimes call this, and don't worry, this is the same thing, just graphically represented. I sometimes call this the A, B, and X. Show me what the character trait was at the beginning. She's stable. Show me what the character trait is at the end. She is unstable. Talk to me about what does that to her. Her son's death. I love this sort of graphic representation. This is the way that my brain works, almost in math terms and formula. And that's what your paragraph would do. If you're talking about dynamic character change, just give me a little bit of that evidence here. Well, at the beginning she's this, and here's my evidence. Her son dies, and this turns her unstable, and here's my evidence of the unstable. And then your paragraph's over. Yeah, briefly I will. Some of you will choose to write about a dynamic character tomorrow. Static. If you're talking about a static character, tell me the trait. What is Sappleton's niece? She is dishonest. She is cruel. She is manipulative. Okay, great. Show me that at the beginning. Okay, I'll show you when she first lies. Now show me that at the end. Jessica, can you think of the evidence in the open window that would show that she's dishonest at the end?
Well, she tells the other person,
Mrs. Sappleton.
Mrs. Sappleton,
Uh-huh.
that he got sick.
That's correct. She makes up another lie at the end, and that's my evidence that she lies at the beginning, she lies at the end, she's dishonest throughout the story. I've just proved my point. And here's how I would represent that. That's it. That's a plan for my paragraph, by the way. In the claim sentence, I say, hey, window develops Appleton's niece as manipulative. My first couple sentences talk about her first lie, and then my next couple sentences talk about her last lie, and then I conclude by saying she remains dishonest throughout the story. I know we're kind of moving at light speed through this. Am I going too fast? Anybody want me to repeat anything? Yeah, Micah. Yeah. Remember also that I am recording this discussion, so I would love that at some point we would be able to unblock YouTube and you could sit there with your Chromebooks and actually watch the video of this when you're writing to review something, but we'll do what we can. Round characters. I want you to find evidence for both character traits. So Melinda Alice, evidence of her cruelty is probably given by the bullying behavior. And then find evidence for a different character trait that significantly differs from the first. So that would be her wishing for other people's benefit. I love math and I love logic, so I represent it this way. Find evidence for and evidence, in other words, the opposite of A. There's a little advanced teaching for you today. That's how you represent that in symbolic logic. But the point is clear. Melinda Alice is cruel and Melinda Alice is charitable. She has both sides. That's the A and the not A. Those are antonyms. The adjective descriptions are opposite of each other. Just find that evidence, and you should be able to find it. So here we've got the plan. Melinda Alice is cruel. Oh, I'm sorry. Cruel, and my evidence is her bullying. She is charitable, and my evidence is the wish that she has, even though she never follows through on it. We are almost to the end of our time, so I just want to briefly address, this is probably the least of all four of them, the flat character. And I know it's a lot of language, but let's break it down. All you've got to say is the character never demonstrates more than one single character trait, and support it with a discussion of the trait they do demonstrate. So if you think that the author or the narrator in The Telltale Heart is homicidal or insane, and that's all he ever is, and that's all you ever get from him, you think he's flat? You think he has one character trait? Then show me that at multiple points through the story. And just say the author never gives us anything else. But remember that this evidence, and that's where your specific details come in. 4 out of the 20 points on your analytical writing is evidence. So make sure that you have it. All right, how's that for a light speed lecture? Once you're finished with your notes, log out, close down, and return the books. Will, you have a question?
Yeah, can you go back?
Sure. Remember, if I went too fast for you, you always have the opportunity to ask questions during writing sessions. You always have the opportunity to seek me out during AI, and you always have the opportunity to review this lecture on YouTube, so please feel free to. No need to plug in because I won't be charging them between periods.